The first reading is from Isaiah 58, 1 through 11. Shout out, do not hold back. Lift up your voice like a trumpet. Announce to my people their rebellion, to the house of humans their sins. Yet day after day they seek me and delight to know my ways, as if they were a nation that practiced righteousness and did not forsake the ordinance of the Creator. They ask of me righteous judgments. They delight to draw near to God. Why do we fast, but you do not see? Why humble ourselves, but you do not notice? Look, you serve your own interest on your fast day and oppress all your workers. Look, you fast only to quarrel and to fight and to strike with a wicked fist. Such fasting as you do today will not make your voice heard on high. Is such the fast that I choose, a day to humble oneself? Is it to bow down the head like a bulrush and to lie in sackcloth and ashes? Will you call this a fast, a day acceptable to the Creator? Is not this the fast that I choose, to loose the bonds of injustice, to undo the thongs of the yoke, to let the oppressed go free, and to break every yoke? Is it not to share your bread with the hungry and bring the homeless poor into your house? When you see the naked, to cover them, and not to hide yourself from your own kin? Then your light shall break forth like the dawn, and your healing shall spring up quickly. Your vindicator shall go before you. The glory of God shall be your rear guard. Then you shall call, and the beloved will answer. You shall cry for help, and the beloved will say, here I am. If you remove the yoke from among you, the pointing of the finger, the speaking of evil, if you offer your food to the hungry and satisfy the needs of the afflicted, then your light shall rise in the darkness, and your gloom will be like the noonday. The Creator will guide you continually and satisfy your needs in parched places and make your bones strong. And you shall be like a watered garden, like a spring of water whose waters never fail. The second reading is from Matthew chapter 5, 13 through 20. You are the salt of the earth, but if salt has lost its taste, how can its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything, but is thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A city built on a hill cannot be hid. No one, after lighting a lamp, puts it under the bushel basket, but on the lampstand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so they may see your good works and give glory to your Creator in heaven. Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have come not to abolish, but to fulfill. For truly I tell you, until heaven and earth pass away, not one letter, not one stroke of a letter, will pass from the law until all is accomplished. Therefore, whoever breaks one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever does them and teaches them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven.
Let's say a prayer, okay? Dear Holy One, as we grapple with these ancient texts that our faith ancestors have handed on to us, open our hearts to hear how it may impact us, to open us up, to become more fully alive, that we engage life and each other and you more honestly and in more reality. God, use these texts to help shatter some false ideas or illusions that may be life-limiting to us. Oh God, give us ears to hear what you may be saying to us this day. And we ask this in the name of Jesus. Amen. The title for the reflection this morning is Why Shine? And this is taken from the Matthew text. which is a continuation historically in what has been called the Sermon on the Mount. So last week, Mark and Cheryl read to us what is referred to as the Beatitudes, the beginning of this Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus is speaking to his followers. And it's one of the 5 major teaching sections in the Gospel of Matthew. So after the Beatitudes, and I want to say, by the way, Mark did a fabulous, I told Cheryl, though, Mark was far too complimentary of me last week. That always makes me nervous. But anyway, Mark did a wonderful job, and I sure loved the story of he and his teacher that he concluded with. But so we're going to pick up this week, continuing in this sermon. And Jesus is recorded as saying, "You are the salt of the earth, and you are the light of the world." And the first thing I would like to point out is Jesus is saying these are not things to aspire to. He's saying you are these things. You're already these things. You're my followers. You are salt and you are light. And 2 of the characteristics, or these 2 things, salt and light, share a common characteristic in that they are perceived by our senses. Our eyes, sight, can perceive light, and our taste can perceive salt. And so for me, part of what I suggest Jesus may be teaching us here is that when we are followers of Jesus, we can be perceived by the senses, and I refer back to that theme that I've been addressing for the last couple of months since I've been here. I believe, as followers of Jesus and as a church, one of our primary tasks is to help make the invisible God visible. And so I highlighted in the text that Lori read to us. I think that's the point of these first 2 paragraphs of the Matthew text, is so that people may see and experience the good works of the Creator in heaven. So we're not salt and we're not light so that people think we're right or we're smarter or we're better Christians than somebody else. The idea is not to bring attention to ourselves, but the idea here is that we would help make the invisible God visible in this world. And that's really what light does. When you turn on a light, I came in my office this morning, turned on the lights. It was dark. Now, I don't look at the lights, but the light reveals what's in my office. And I think as followers of Jesus, as we're trying to follow Jesus on this way of radical love, we don't want people looking at us as much to what we could reveal, which I'm hopeful is this loving God that we have encountered and experienced so that others might experience and encounter this divine loving other that we name God. And similarly, salt brings out certainly flavor in food, and salt is an incredibly rich metaphor. I was sharing on the Deeper Dive, which is the little Bible study on Fridays that we do with these same texts, where we go into these texts with much greater depth because we just have more time. But in this time and place where Jesus spoke, one of the things that salt did was the common people would bake their meals not on a gas stove, which isn't good for the environment, I'm told, and not on an electric stove, but they would have wood burner fires. And there was not a lot of firewood for particularly the poor in this time and place that Jesus spoke. And so what people would do is take a little bit of salt and mix it with either camel dung or donkey dung, and that became the fuel for the fire where they cooked their meals. So one of the properties of salt is it helps dung burn. Who would have thought? And then once it's burned, it's not good for anything anymore, because whatever makes salt salt gets burned up in the fire and it's not of value anymore. And so salt helps burn and make fire, and light certainly illuminates. And the idea here is that so that people would be able to see and experience this loving creator. So that's my take on these first two metaphors in the Sermon on the Mount. That's why we shine, to point our finger to the one who put light in us. All right, so the great question then is, how do we do that? How do we shine? How do we let people see this one we call God? Well, and that's where I believe this Isaiah text and why it was chosen in the lectionary is so handy, because the Isaiah text, as Pamela said in the chat, this is an incredible text. It's one of the most famous passages in the Hebrew scriptures, Isaiah 58. And I think before we look into this, just a little tidbit I'd like to share with you. One of the great influences in my own spiritual journey has been a Jewish rabbi of the 20th century, a man named Abraham Joshua Heschel. He wrote quite a bit, and he was a very influential Jewish rabbi of the last century. And he has a classic book on the prophets of the Hebrew scriptures. And one of the points that Rabbi Heschel makes is to understand the prophets. It's key to realize the prophets did not primarily foretell the future. When you and I hear the word prophet, that's what we think. It's somebody's going to tell us what's going to happen in the future, to prophesy. But Heschel maintains that the primary task of the prophets for the Hebrew people was to communicate how God feels. Heschel believed that God very much has emotions, and we are made in the image of God, and that's why we have emotions, because we're made in that image. And that for Heschel, God was very emotional, and that the Hebrew prophets tell us how God feels. And particularly in this Isaiah 58 text, that's certainly what's going on here. God is saying to the people, to give you a historical context, the people have come back from captivity in Babylon, and they've repopulated the land, and they're trying to rebuild everything. And they look around and they see we have no resources to do anything. We're living in a desolate, remote place that was devastated by war, and we're trying to rebuild, and we have nothing. So we'll fast. And so they fast, trying to get God to do. It's sort of a part of the God, we'll fast for you if you help us out. It's that kind of a deal. And God comes back to them and says, wait a minute. Is this the kind of, you think this is a fast where you just stop eating food? But look at how you're behaving. You're mean to each other. You're sniping and griping. You're mean as rattlesnakes. You're pointing fingers at each other. You're not kind. You call that, I don't call that a fast. And you wonder why I'm not doing anything. It's because that's not a fast. He says, here's the kind of fast I choose. And I'm trying to find it here there's a fourfold thing here. Oh, to loose the bonds of injustice, to undo the thongs of the yoke, to let the oppressed free and go free, and to break every yoke. That's what I'm talking about, where we do works of justice and we try to make the world a fairer, better place for everybody. That's what God is saying through the prophet Isaiah. And this is how I'm going to suggest we make our light shine when we're about that kind of work, when we do that kind of stuff, when we're helping to liberate people and fight against racism and injustice of any kind, when we work on behalf of people that identify as other than heterosexual, to make them feel included and part of us, which they are. I'm suggesting that is our light shining. And no matter what culture or race or gender you are welcome, you are beloved. That is making our light shine, to give glory to the one who is our creator, who has loved us So I'm suggesting that's how we do that. As you're well aware, in December, we were able to make a house that we have available to a refugee family, the Tatarenkos from Ukraine. And it all started, I want to give credit where credit is due, to two women in my life. We saw an article in the paper, when there was a paper before it closed, that there were other groups in town making space for Ukrainian refugees. And my wife, Nancy, looked at me and says, well, you're going to be the pastor of this church. Is your church going to do that too? And that was a provocative question that pierced me. And then I come to church that Sunday and hear Karen McClintock preaching, and she's preaching about helping Ukrainian folks. And so I'm not the brightest bulb on the tree, but when two wise women and my wife are speaking the same message, could this be? Maybe. And so I go to another wise woman in my life, Linda Anderson, our moderator and treasurer, and I say, Linda, I know we were going to try and rent that house out to make some money because we have a shortfall in our budget, and that would be a good thing. But what if we're supposed to give that away to make space for refugees? And Linda thought about it, talked to the council, and well, you guys know what happened. And I'm going to suggest to you that whatever good we may have done for the Tatarenkos, than the recipient. I mean, we've benefited certainly as much as they have. It has energized us. It has brought life to us. It has reminded us of why we do what we do, of why we are a people, to help others. And I suggest too that part of what's going on here is on a deep, deep level, we're all aware that we're all refugees in this world. We've all been told, well, you're not right. You don't belong. You don't fit here. You're too old. You're too dumb. You're too fat. You're too skinny. You're not the right sexual orientation. You're not the right color of skin. You're not. We live in a world that is constantly telling us we're not. We've all, at times in our life, felt like refugees. So to be able to make space, a sanctuary, where a refugee family from Ukraine could find safety and peace and comfort. We're doing that for ourselves as well as doing it for them. And that's what I'm suggesting our church is to become, a sanctuary where refugees of all stripes can come and find a place to fit, to be loved, to be accepted. And that's what we're working towards. And as we do this is what I've talked to our church moderator, Linda, about. As we do this, I trust and believe the resources we need will be provided by God. That's certainly indicated in this Isaiah text. There's another text I love in Proverbs, the book of Proverbs, chapter 19, verse 17 says this, that if you help the poor, you are loaning to God. The verse literally says, the one who helps the poor lends to God. How would you like to be walking around with a big IOU in your pocket signed by God? That's what that verse is saying. So my suggestion for us as a faith family is, if we're about this work that Isaiah talks about, if we're letting our light shine, the resources we need will be here to help us do that. Now we're getting ready to begin a pledging season. And for those of you that are new to us, pledging is where the members of our community say, in the next year, I will give this amount of money to help this project of Ashland United Congregational Church work and function. And Greg Janke is going to be our leader of that project for this year. He'll be our stewardship campaign leader. And so over the next few months, you'll hear a lot more about that. But I'm going to suggest that if we're about the kinds of things Isaiah talked about in this passage, if we are helping the poor and the refugees find safety, the resources will be there for us to do that. And our pledging will tell us how much of this kind of work we will be able to do. So whatever it is, we will, over the next few months, all as a family pledge together. It will help us determine how well we can do various projects. And here's some of the ones that I foresee now: to continue to make space for folks like the Tatarenkos in our life, where we can help those, the unhoused, or people that don't have enough, where we can continue to help those folks. In our own midst, one of the things Isaiah talks about, we're not just to do this for strangers and aliens and for people other, but for our own kin as well. And as I look at our community, a number of us are just older, and we've got a number of families in our community that are dealing with folks that have memory loss and memory issues. And that's a huge strain on the entire family system to try to help provide care and support for people that are struggling with memory issues. So our resources, I'm hoping, will have enough to be able to help care and provide support for these folks. Now, Linda tells me, just because of the way economics are, we're going to start the year off. We're fine right now, but we're going to start the new year off for us, which starts in July, with about a $35,000 deficit, because $35,000 that we had last year will not be coming in again this year for various reasons. So at any rate, so if our pledging stays the same, we're starting off negative 35. But I trust if we do these kinds of things, monies will come in to help us do the good things. So not just for our own families with memory issues, but we also want to make space for younger families to join us and to care for their children. And so right now, providing care for children is a strain on us, and we want to have resources to be able to do that. We want to be able to continue to care for local refugees, whether they're from a foreign land or not, but people in this town that don't feel like they have a home or they don't feel safe. We want to be able to make space for them. And we're going to have needs to help take care of the building that we have, because it's older and there's things that need to be done there, as well as our staff, our wonderful staff that helps care for so many people, to provide them cost of living increases to be able to not stress about money. So these are the kinds of resources we're going to need over the next few months, and how we pledge and give will tell us how much caring we can do. And so I just want to put that out for you even before we get into pledge season. But I'm trusting that if we're doing the kinds of things God wants us to do, the resources are going to be there. We'll have what we need. I fully believe that. Hoping, this is my prayer. I pray this almost every morning. God, that you would break our hearts with the things that break yours, because there's so many good things that could be done. But what specific good things can we do? And that we'll learn that together. I'm trusting as we were able to help the Tatarenkos when my wife and Karen and Linda all spoke to me, that we'll be able to do things for others as well. And it's not only that we're doing it for others, because I want you to hear this, we're doing this for ourselves as well. I think it's the Dalai Lama that says, when you do what you really believe is true, you find happiness. When our behavior and our beliefs come together, that's where we thrive and find happiness. And so doing the kinds of things Isaiah says we should be doing, and that's what we believe. So when we do that, and we can actually give into that, it brings happiness to us as well. So that's my reflection on these two readings this morning. Why do we shine? We shine to give glory to the one who has loved us. And we want others to know you are loved as well. And we want to create a sanctuary where refugees of all stripes and kinds and shapes and sizes and colors can find love and acceptance as we have. May it be so.